out with Dave's event. There's really not much Dave doesn't really catch, to be honest with you. He's one of the most popular captains on the shore. I had the pleasure of meeting for the first time at the Florida Fishing Expo, and anyone that knows Dave knows of his professionalism, his wit, and his ability to fish. So it was our pleasure to actually have him come in and do the seminar. Dave, it's all yours.
Thanks. How's everybody going?
Great.
David Dennison, born and raised here. Fished Southshore pretty much my whole life. I also fished the Boca Grande area for tarpon in the May and June months. I moved my whole operation down there. I lived down there May and June. Run all my charters Monday through Friday out of Boca Grande Pass on the beaches of Charlotte Harbor and all that good stuff. I am a captain in the Professional Tarpon Tournament Series, both what we refer to as the PTTS, which is the Professional Tarpon Tournament Series, and the WPTTS, which is the Women's Professional Tarpon Tournament Series. It is the largest women's tournament in the world. This year we've got almost 62 teams. Basically the rules are all of the anglers, anybody who touches a rod has to be a female. You can have a male captain, and we are allowed to have a mate for the WPTTS side. It just helps, the ladies with, they don't have to physically handle their fish. I personally won't weigh a fish in the PTTS under 155 pounds. It's just not going to stay in the top 5. You need to be in the 155 to 200 range to be in the top 5. It's probably one of the richest tarpon tournament series around. We fish 5 regular season events, and then we take the top 25 teams to the Tarpon Cup Championship, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have seen it on TV. It's a nationally televised event. This coming year will be the first year that the WPTTS will also be nationally televised. So that is going to be a big game changer in the lady angler side of the house. Some of the females, which to be honest with you are just as good or even better than some of the male teams, are now going to get some national notoriety through this event and all that. It's a big money entry fee in it. We've got about $20,000 in cost per team to fish the tournaments, entry fee wise, expenses. That's just fishing the tournament. That's not including our condos and everything else logistically that goes into us as captains moving our operations down to that area. Myself, Jeff Hageman, Artie Price, C.A. Richardson, Greg DeVault, a lot of the bigger names in the tarpon world. I'd say 80% of us that fish Boca Grande Pass are from the Tampa, Palm Harbor, Tarpon Springs area. It's a fishery that came about probably about 15 years ago. The style of fishing that we do is basically jigging, is it's referred to kind of thing. Basically how I'm going to, just to give you guys a little brief, I'm going to pretty much do this as a tarpon seminar. There's several different ways to catch tarpon. I'm going to kind of go through each one. At the end of it, we'll do a little question and answer, and then we'll come into Tampa Bay, and you can ask me about anything in the world that's going on right now. A lot of us are offshore fishing right now when we don't have tonight's weather coming through, and it's going to blow 25 tomorrow kind of thing. I ran offshore today. The kingfish, mackerel, blackfin tuna bite is absolutely phenomenal right now. I mean, this has probably been by far the best Spanish mackerel kingfish year I've seen in a long time, and I fished on an SKA pro team for about 10 years. So as far as, there's not a lot of really big fish which we would be interested in an SKA event, but as far as numbers, bending rods, just going out and having fun, it's literally ridiculous. The bait right now in Tampa Bay hasn't been better in the last 10 years. Rick will tell you, a lot of the other guys, even as captains, last year we struggled for bait. Bait was one of those, every morning it was a 2-hour process. I'm sure a lot of us, the normal bait spots, cockroach flats, all that kind of stuff. It didn't come into the markers last year and really stay on the markers. It's on every range marker out in the bay, as thick as can be, from Apollo Beach to the Skyway. The skyways, literally, if you throw your net more than twice, you've done something wrong right now. This morning I pulled under the Southshore, the South End fishing pier. I chummed, I looked down, I literally did like 2 flicks of the chum. I was like, oh, put the chum away kind of deal. And I mean, it was literally 2 throws and I had both my live wells blacked out. What I'd like to do is, like I said, we'll start with the Boca Grande fishery, tell you a little bit about it. A lot of people have a lot of questions about it because it's something that gets so much attention nationally. I get people all the time that, you know, come down and they're like, I saw you on TV and fishing the PTTS and all that. It's a unique fishery as far as the way we fish it. Basically, we're positioning on top of schools of fish the whole time. Basically, we run over the top of them, we mark them, we get ahead of them. We basically present our baits and we drift over the top of the school. Once we're no longer marking them, the school's moved, we pick up and we move. So the entire time you're fishing, you're over top of fish. It's just a matter of when one of them decides to open his mouth and say, oh, I'll eat that one kind of deal. But I fished everywhere, literally, in our side of the world that you can fish: Belize, Panama, Costa Rica, you name it. I've been there tarpon fishing, and there is nothing that compares to Boca Grande Pass when the bite's on. And it's not when the bite's on. An average day in there, we'll hook 5 kind of deal. An above average day, I've hooked 12, 13 fish and been at the fishery waiting on them to open at 11 o'clock because my customer's like, dude, I can't do this anymore. You know, our average fish is 120, 130. You sit into 4 120, 130 pound fish, and your lactic acid, if we talk about lactic acid buildup in fish and why they fight the way they do and everything else, your muscles and arms, I've literally had grown men that, like, I'm watching them put a rod because they can't hold it anymore. They physically just can't do it. This is my tournament gear. This is actually rigged the way I fish tournaments. This is actually what I use in tournaments. It's a Fenor Marquesas 16 reel and a Shimano. It's actually a Kingfish rod. It's actually part of Shimano's Kingfish series. The reason why we want it is if you look at the tip of it, it's super fast. That's how we detect the bite down there. Basically, this is how we're fishing. We don't refer to it as a breakaway jig because we don't want it to break away. There's a lot of misconceptions of Boca Grande Pass and that we're snagging fish and that we're throwing lead all over the bottom. 90% of the time, basically, the hook comes up, it either rides up on the top or it slides all the way through. The state's basically made it to where whatever attachment device that we use has to be 50-pound test or greater. Basically, it has to be stronger than the main line that you're using so that it doesn't break away. Get jigs occasionally, but everything we use is circle hooks, if you see. And if you tried to snag a fish in there, you can't snag it. I mean, it's almost impossible. There's a lot of bad press about what we do, and basically what it comes down to is money. To be honest with you, kind of deal. The way that they used to fish down there, if you look at how we run our charters, their style of fishing kind of changed. We came in and everybody wants to do what they saw on TV. It's exciting. It's very fast paced. Fish are flying through the air all over the place. It's just a different fishery. Basically, most all of us are running either 40 or 50 pound main line. That comes down to a short bimini twist, which is what that is. That's the bimini up top. That's basically double line. In that distance, I wrap mine pretty tight, so sometimes it's really kind of hard to separate them two out. But there is 2 lines there. It's basically just a bimini twist to a uni to uni knot down to 80 and an 8/0 Gamakatsu circle hook. Depending on and this is the other thing that it makes Boca Grande unique. I am one of the few people that actually have the molds to this jig head. Pretty much if you buy one of them, you buy it from, there's like 4 of us that physically make these jig heads as far as casting the lead, pouring the lead, doing all that for it. If you look at it, it's basically just like a regular jig head that you would throw for trout fishing, but there's no hook on it kind of deal. The hook is attached to here kind of thing. So different people have different techniques with it. It's either attached via a tie wrap, a monofilament line, or some people use like copper rigging wire that we use offshore for rigging up ballyhoo and all that. It's this is probably the most popular, what you'll always see in the ads. This is also why we show this, because we won't show you our colors that we actually use in tournaments kind of deal. We have to have some secrecy of how we fish tournaments, but 90% of the time, if you're fishing on a charter with us down there, you're going to fish my tournament colors, because that's, for one, I'm pre-fishing. Your trip is my pre-fishing for my tournaments. So I want to see what they're eating throughout the week. They'll eat different things based on different light conditions and all that. But that is what used to be referred to as a 12-fathom jig. It's a 4-inch shad tail that we bite off about the first, the full size of that jig comes to about there. We trim the profile down on it. Why we do that, I don't know. There's a lot of things in Boca Grande that if you take just normal tarpon fishing, throw everything that you know out the window. Because if you think of how a tarpon feeds and the way his eyes are onset on the top of his head, they're kind of like a snook. They're designed to feed from underneath things. The way we fish, we're literally fishing that far off the bottom in that pass. There's a lot of things that I can't explain to you how the fish feed the way they do down there. That's another way of, like, when people say we snag fish kind of deal. It's impossible for us to snag a fish, because if the fish was up here kind of thing and the jig was up that high, but literally, when this ceiling's a little low for me to do it, but I'll try to do it. Basically, when we're fishing, basically, and this is how it basically works: is the captain is always the captain. He doesn't move from where he's at. The steering wheel, the engine's always running all day. That's why tarpon charters in Boca Grande cost a little bit more. Our expense is more. When pretty much I leave the dock at 6 o'clock in the morning, my engine doesn't turn off until I drop off, which is usually 8 o'clock at night, because I run, most of the days I run 2 doubles down there. But basically what he does is he will find the fish, we'll mark them, he'll get in front of them, and he'll say, all right, drop them, kind of deal. Basically what we're doing is we're dropping them down until we hit the bottom. And most tournament fishermen don't reel at all. We basically hold the rod, and it's hard to do this because I don't have any distance between me and the bottom right now. But the average depth in there is 40 feet. We've got a couple of holes that are in the 70 to 80 foot range, depending on where the fish are sitting in different parts of the tide. Most of us basically, we hold the rod at this pretty much position. It hits the bottom, you feel it hit the bottom, and most of us don't even turn the handle kind of thing. We basically just lift the rod tip up from basically pointing. The rod tip would normally be pointing on the water or right in the water, and we basically just kind of lift the rod tip up. So if you look at, basically where my jig head is, that's basically what it looks like on the bottom down there. I want to be literally within 5 to 6 inches off the bottom. Once again, it's one of those, if you're up here, if the bottom is obviously the floor and you're in here, you don't get bit. It's, for some reason, it's weird. It's almost like we've wanted to film it, and some of us have tried with GoPro cameras and actually launching GoPro cameras down there to try to see them feed. Unlike most fisheries, and I've been involved in the filming of a lot of different TV shows, even the PTTS and all that, a lot of TV shows you see that we have a diver or a snorkeler or a swimmer in the water that's getting a lot of those water shots. Due to the shark activity in Boca Grande Pass, we can't do that. None of us have a big enough set to say, I'm gonna die at Boca Grande Pass during tarpon season. Because I've watched more 16 to 18 foot hammerhead attacks eat fish out of my hands in the boat kind of thing than none of us want to get in the water. We fall in the water sometimes tournament fishing just because of the way we're running around trying to get to the chair and all that. And it's a pretty eerie feeling when you fall in the water in Boca Grande Pass, because it gets pretty crazy. The series is literally something. I grew up obviously fishing here. I fish the Skyway before I leave for Boca Grande. I fish St. Pete Beach. I fish Egmont. I fish every other tarpon spot we've got here in Tampa Bay, which I'll show you a lot of the stuff that is a unique thing that I'll talk about. And when I went down to Boca Grande the first time 10, 12 years ago, I was like, this is the coolest thing in the world. I mean, it is literally an experience that until you've physically done it, you can't see it on TV and have a clue as to really what it is. I mean, you're close enough to other boats that you can literally reach out and touch hands kind of thing. There's some times that, like, if the fish are really wadded up in one spot, that I've literally had to back up in the boat and move my rod tip because my rod tip and the guys on the other boat's rod tip were sword fighting in the middle of the water kind of thing. And it's funny that you're like, how do you ever catch fish like that? And in that pass, when those fish are there, I'm not exaggerating when I say there's 10,000 to 20,000 fish in that pass at any given time. And for there to be that big of a concentration of tarpon anywhere in the world is it's, you know, I work with Kathy Gilbert a lot with the state. I work with a lot of, and we don't know. The science is just not there for us, even at this point, to know why those fish come into that pass. Why don't they sit in Egmont? Egmont's the exact same structure. If you look at the current flow of Egmont, if you look at the ledges and the depths and everything else, why don't they sit in there the way they do? I'll roll over pods of fish in Boca Grande that, I'm not kidding you, they're stacked on top of each other 40 foot high in the water column. From the very bottom to 20 foot shy of the surface in 60 feet of water. And if you could just imagine how many fish you could fit on top of each other in 40 foot of depth of water, and you can't, you look at your sonar, you can't determine the bottom. It screws the sonars up to the point that they don't know where the bottom is and where the fish are because they're that tight. And I do a lot of offshore fishing. I do a lot of grouper fishing. I do a lot of that stuff. Used to marking individual fish, seeing little pods of bait, little things like that. But I mean, we're talking 150, 160 pound fish that are literally stacked on each other like cordwood. And they're just sitting there facing into the tide, waiting on something to come by them and eat. It's really neat. And we also have, you know, I'm sure everybody's heard of what we call hill tides. Basically, your bigger tides, May and June, associated with the new and the full moons. Boca Grande Pass is one of the other cool. Basically, our jig fishery is a morning thing. They don't eat the jigs very well in the afternoon or in the evenings. We do a lot of live bait crab fishing in the afternoon. Going rate, tarpon season, Boca Grande Pass, a dozen pass crabs is about $40 a dozen, kind of deal. I won't leave the dock without about 5 dozen, you know, crabs in my well. That doesn't compare to the $140 a dozen I spend on goggle eyes in Miami and Fort Lauderdale when I'm sail fishing down there in the wintertime. You know, it's a different story. You know, a lot of people with us, when we talk about buying bait, you know, we complain that shrimp at one place is $5 a dozen and shrimp at another place is $2.50 a dozen. I pay $130 a dozen for goggle eyes, you know, during sailfish season. That's just big money fishing kind of thing. Same thing with the crabs in Boca Grande Pass. You get into the fishery that's down there with the live bait crab stuff, and we pretty much move to, this is my normal tarpon rod setup. If I'm fishing Skyway Bridge, if I'm fishing the beach, if I'm fishing Egmont, it doesn't matter, Boca Grande Pass, these are all my stuff. I do a lot of tarpon fishing, probably more than, you know, a lot of other people do. My new team that we're creating in Boca Grande Pass this year, myself and TJ Stewart, who's a Bradenton-based guide, him and I have now combined our teams, and there's a lot of people watching this year to see what we do. Everybody, if you watch the show, everybody's goal is to knock Artie Price off the Team of the Year throne and all that. We're trying to do that. We're trying to stack some teams right now in the process of taking some of the better captains and the better anglers in there and forming them into one team. But to stay on topic kind of deal, this is an 8-foot. I actually just picked these guys up as a sponsor here in the last 6 months or so, and they actually make a really incredible blank. It is a U-Pro rod, and there's a lot of you guys, know some of the guys at U-Pro. They've got a lot of local representation. It's an 8-foot heavy action rod. It's got a lot of meat to it. You can really put a lot of bend on it. But when you're throwing crabs, same thing. You got to have that real flexible tip, because if you're trying to throw a crab with a stiff rod, you can get it from here to maybe that back door kind of deal. This is 60-pound braid down to a 60 or an 80-pound leader, depending on where I'm fishing, what the size of the fish are, and if I'm losing any fish. Once again, down to a circle hook. Primarily on these rods, I'm always throwing a 5/0 hook. Regardless if I'm tarpon fish or if I'm crab fishing or if I'm thread fin fishing. As far as most of our skyway fish and most of our beach fish and stuff like that, I catch on either thread fins or pinfish. I'm going to get off topic a lot of times because there's a lot of stuff going inside my head that I try to get you guys to understand a lot of what I do. A pinfish trap. If you guys don't own a pinfish trap, it's one of the best investments you'll ever make. I've got like 8 of them, and they're scattered from here to Sarasota kind of thing. They're a very small investment. They're like $20, $25 for one of the big commercial ones like we use. All the ladyfish and some of the junk mackerel and some of the other fish that you catch throughout the day, I bait my pinfish traps with them, and I come back in the next morning and I empty my pinfish traps, because most of us, the same thing. If you're getting bait on the grass flats, you're going to get pinfish in it. There's just no way of chumming white bait on the grass flat, especially cockroach and all that, southern stuff down there, without getting pinfish. If you're at the Skyway kind of deal, or markers and stuff like that, you have a hard time getting pinfish. I catch more redfish on pinfish than I do anything else, and I catch more tarpon on pinfish than everybody else. It's just an awesome bait. It's a very hardy bait, and it is really easy to use. But basically, that's my setup. Guides, my tackle stuff's a little different. I have 8 of these kind of deal. And it's just because when the bite's on and you break a fish off or something happens, we get a leader that gets chafed up, nobody wants to stand there and watch me tie a knot. You see me do that here. You don't want to do that when you're paying me, to take tarpon fishing kind of deal. So I usually will throw it in the tower and I'll grab another one and get you back fishing. And when I get a couple minute downtime, I'll re-rig one. These rods here, this setup alone is about $650. That reel's pretty pricey. It's a reel that I use SK kingfishing, and we also use them down South Florida, basically sail fishing and dolphin fishing on kites. But I have 15 of these. They're pretty, but you gotta remember, I do this for a living. I do this as a tournament angler kind of deal. It's a different story for me. I break a lot of rods in Boca Grande. It's just one of those things. It's just part of the cost of doing business down there. I break 4 to 5 rods a year. Fishing those tarpon, we put a lot of pressure on fish. We're really close to them, and if you get anglers that not necessarily don't know what they're doing, but it's just a different fishery, and everybody freaks out when they see a 180-pound fish that's 5 feet away from them, and that's where 90% of our fish are lost. People want to rear back and they want to try to drag them across the water like you would a trout or a redfish or something to land them, and you just can't put that much pressure. Not necessarily on the fish. On the tackle will handle it, but the rod won't. If you're that close to it and you're really rearing down on them, I'll usually break rods right about the 2nd or 3rd eye. And luckily, Shimano's very good to me, and pretty much I walk in, and they usually, during tarpon season, I use Dogfish for them as a local tackle store. When I'm in Boca Grande, I don't come back to Tampa. Once I'm down there, I have one of my teammates that stays up here and comes back and forth on the weekends for me. He basically will run in there and swap out my rods for me and bring me down a couple of new rods. But that's why I have so many, is if I break a couple of rods in a week, what am I going to do? Tell my customers, hey, we can't leave the dock because I broke my rods. I gotta have backup gear and backup gear to backup gear and everything else. But that's basically the gist of the tarpon fishing. Once again, everything I use is a circle hook. That's one thing that I will say. It doesn't matter if I'm tarpon fishing or trout fishing, or the only time I don't use circle hooks is king fishing, and it's just because that just doesn't work. But if it's not on a stinger rig, offshore trolling and all that, it's a circle hook. I'm sponsored by Gamakatsu, but I would use them if I wasn't. I think they're probably the best hook that's out there. Owner, I've had some issues with them. I don't think they're as sharp, but basically these are the 2 hooks and the 2 bags that I use for tarpon fishing. This is an 8/0 circle hook, and this is a 5/0 circle hook. I do like offsets. A lot of people, talk about offset, non-offset, and all that. I do think my hookup ratio with offset hooks is a little better than non-offsets. Whereas different when you get into the bill fishing and all that stuff down south, because when we're in Miami and Fort Lauderdale and all that area, and we're doing the sailfish series stuff, you have to use inline circle hooks. You can't use offsets. The way those fish eat off of kites and all that, yeah, they have a tendency sometimes to get hooked a little deeper with an offset hook. Tarpon fishing, if anybody's experienced, when a tarpon eats a bait, he eats it and grabs it and goes, and there's no playing around with it. That's pretty much the gist of Boca Grande. Same thing, Egmont, the Skyway. The Skyway, a lot of people don't know how to fish it, but it's probably one of the best tarpon fisheries that we have around. and the fish are here. They've been here for 3 or 4 weeks. It's really no secret. I was trying to keep it a secret for a while, but our fish have been here since the end of January. We had such a hot winter. You got to remember, we've got such, especially the South Shore is incredible because not only do we host big fish year-round through Apollo Beach. If you guys ever go to the Manatee thing, you see them out there rolling, you see them underneath it. Those are our resident fish. Those are fish that aren't migratory, that they're not leaving in and out with all the rest of the schools. Those fish, when they winter here, they've got to stay in a power plant to stay warm. Our little juvenile fish, which I'm going to get into in a whole different thing, that's a lot of things. Everybody wants to go catch big fish. When you've caught enough big tarpon, if I'm not winning money in the process kind of deal, or I'm taking people to do it, I don't like to catch big tarpon. Those of you that have been around here a long time, you remember Mel Berman. Mel used to do a lot of downtown tarpon fishing with me. Mel and I were very good friends for 15 years. When I got into the guiding industry, Mel really helped me out, really took me under. I used to do his radio show 4 or 5 times a year before he passed away. The downtown fish, once again, they're our resident fish. They're juvenile fish. Basically, our juvenile tarpon, they grow up in this estuary. They don't leave until they get bigger. You know, you don't see, in Boca Grande Pass, we don't catch 30-pound, 40-pound tarpon. Those fish stay in estuaries, they stay in rivers. Right behind me, Little Manatee River is probably one of the best tarpon estuaries that we've got. Not only in the wintertime, but in the summertime and all that. I mean, they're no secret. The railroad trestle, 41 bridge, all that stuff, you see them out there rolling. I mean, that's something I think I've excelled in, especially downtown. When I get back from Boca Grande, I spend pretty much the end of July, all of August, running all my trips out of Marjorie Park at Davis, Iowa, and fishing those downtown juvenile fish. The fish down there average 10 to 40 pounds, and we do it on snook tackle. This is the same stuff that if you inshore snook, redfish, and trout with me on a daily charter, this is what I downtown tarpon fish with. It's an 8-foot St. Croix rod, a 4000 series reel, doesn't matter, Stratic, you know, quantity, you name it. I'm sponsored by Quantum, so I have all of their stuff. 20-pound braid. Everything I use is a Power Pro, down to a 30-pound fluorocarbon leader. And hook size on those fish is just like any other fish, and match the hook size to the bait. A lot of people think on tarpon fishing I need these 8-aught, 5-aught, these huge hooks. You really don't. If I'm throwing a 3-inch, basically for those downtown fish, I'm throwing the same stuff that I'd be throwing on a snook kind of deal. You know, I'm throwing small little pinfish, and I'm throwing small little white. I'm not even trying the big thread fins that I'm throwing under the bridge, or the big monster pinfish that I'd be throwing under the bridge, under a cork, or on the beach, under a cork and all that. I'm throwing regular snook fishing stuff. The cool thing about the downtown fishery is literally they're rolling every 400 seconds. I mean, it's pretty neat. There's a lot of fish down there. The way I fish them is I sit on the anchor, and I know certain areas that hold fish. I'll get into there, and if I don't see a fish roll behind me in 5 to 10 minutes, I move, and I keep moving until I find a concentration of the fish. Pretty much all of that Davis Island channel area through from the mouth of Pedro Knight Airport all the way through to the convention center, you know, around Channel Side and all that stuff. Just when you fish in that area, kind of know the security regulations in there, because that's kind of gotten stringent in the last 10 years or so. When I first started guiding was pre-9/11, and we used to be able to fish all that stuff down there. Some of our best snook spots in Tampa Bay are downtown and are now inside some of those closed, restricted areas. But it doesn't take rocket science. Everybody goes in there, kill your engine, and let your boat drift until you see fish, kind of thing. And you'll see 1 roll, you'll see 2 roll, you'll see 3 come up together, and they're just rolling around, they're just playing around. When you find an area that they're in, they're going to stay in that area. That's when my pinfish traps are invaluable to me. I mean, I usually move 3 or 4 of them into the downtown, pretty much Apollo Beach, north area that time of year, because that's really what I want for bait. Sometimes it's hard to get white bait up there. There is some areas that it holds bait, but without having to make a really long run and come from basically the South Shore to downtown with bait, I'd rather use pinfish. If I can get pinfish, if I got 20 or 30 pinfish, we're going tarpon fishing. That's really, you know, you're either in there, you're either going to fish a bait until he dies or until he gets eaten, kind of thing. It's not like snook fishing here where you're going to cast baits off, or one's going to get popped on and doesn't, you know, he doesn't commit to it or whatever. But it's a cool fishery. Before Mel started, you know, getting a little older and all that, we used to go in there, and Mel and I jump 7, 8 fish. And towards Mel's later years, he got to where he couldn't fish past 10:30. You know, that time it's hot. I mean, we're talking first week of August, 9:30, 10 o'clock in the morning. You're done. I mean, I'm done. I'm like, dude, I've had 5 bottled waters and I just can't stay hydrated, kind of thing. But it's a cool fishery, especially leaving Apollo Beach. If you live here in Apollo Beach or Ruskin area, it's a 15-minute boat ride downtown. Fish till 9 o'clock, come back, sit on the couch the rest of the day, and because now it's hot and nothing's eaten past 10 o'clock in the morning that time of year, anyways. But the thing that is going to mess me up this year is obviously a lot. You heard we're hosting the Republican National Convention. So that week that the Republican National Convention is usually about the peak of that little downtown tarpon fishery. And I'm sure I'm going to have 15, 18-year-olds on an orange inflatable Coast Guard boat with a 50 cal mounted on the front of it that are going to be like, hey, I don't care about your tarpon fishing. You're not fishing here, kind of deal. So that's going to change things a little bit this year. But downtown, Rick's back there looking at me, shaking his head because I'm telling you spots. But the circles, Apollo Beach, circles, and all the sailboat basin in front of there, I sit out there every morning and catch tarpon at 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. If I pick up out of circles, if I have some of my customers that live in the Apollo Beach area and I physically use circles as dock to pick up, if I get there early and I've got bait, I tarpon fish for 20 to 30 minutes before I pick up. It's cool. You'll see them rolling. If you don't see them rolling, leave. They're not there. Those little fish, when they're in those areas, they're rolling because they need to breathe. If they're downtown, you don't have a lot of dissolved oxygen content in the river. They're rolling because they're trying to breathe. They're one of the only fish that have a semi-developed lung that can actually gulp air from the surface and translate that into oxygen in their bloodstream. So it's kind of cool. I've done it. You can actually put tarpon in lakes, in freshwater lakes, kind of deal, and they'll live, kind of thing, because as long as there's something for them to eat in there, they can't spawn, they can't reproduce, they can't do anything else, but they can live in there. I've got a couple of lakes in Bloomingdale that have 15, 20-pound little tarpon in them, kind of thing. It's kind of neat. But it's the state of Florida, also down at Port Manatee, has a research hatchery. A lot of the little tarpon that you see in Bass Pro Shops, especially in Orlando and the Fort Myers store, I caught most of those fish, and they're now on loan to Bass Pro Shops. Basically, that was done as a research project with the state. We caught those fish when they're in the 5 to 10 pound range, and that's why, same thing, they live in the aquariums at Bass Pro Shops, because they can, for one, handle totally fresh water. They just can't reproduce, but they can breathe, they can eat, they can do everything else, and they will gain weight. Some of those fish that we caught that are in the 5 to 8 pound range are in the 15 to 20 pound range now. They're a very slow growing fish. They don't get very big quick. A lot of the studies have shown a lot of the fish that we catch in Boca Grande Pass are 20, 25, 30-year-old fish. So that's pretty neat if you really think about it, kind of thing. That the fish has been out there and he's dodged sharks and he's went all over the Caribbean, and a lot of the fish that we get, I feel as though come out of Cuba and come out of some of the other southern regions of the state, the Keys, all that. Satellite tags is something that's kind of changed here in the last couple of years. They're about 8,000 a pop. So every time we put one on a fish, we better get some good data out of it. The state doesn't like when I tagged a fish last year in Boca Grande Pass. We let it go, and about 2 minutes and 100 yards from where we let it go, 2 bull sharks came up and ate it, and we watched the satellite tag get eaten by a bull shark, and he actually ate the tag. And I looked at the state, and I was like, well, will the tag still ping itself in the belly of the shark, and we can get some shark data off of it, kind of deal? And they're like, no, it's done. So that was $8 grand, boom, there you go. And obviously with state budgets and everything else, the research stuff is anything, of course it's our passion, but to the general population, a lot of people don't care about fishing and they don't want a lot of money spent towards it. So as guides, we try to help the state as much as we can. And that's pretty much it. One of the biggest things that you can invest in, tarpon fishing wise, without having permanent bruises and scars on your belly like I do, is one of these. There's a couple of different models of these. They're basically rod belts. This is, I think, one of the better ones. When Bass Pro Shops does their little spring fishing extravaganza, whatever thing, these things are usually like 15 bucks a piece. I usually buy like 5 or 6 of them that time of year, and I throw them away after a couple months because they get faded and ugly and the straps wear out and everything else. But the cool thing is, is I can put this on the guy who likes the buffet line, and I can put it on the 105-pound female like my wife kind of thing, and it fits either one of them. It just wraps around. It's Velcroed in the back, and that's how it is. When they come, there's a metal pin inside of it for the gimbal to sit in. All of our tarpon rod, all of our Boca Grand rods all have the gimbal on the bottom of them, but that's because it's going into my fighting chair. If you look at my boat, if you look at some of the pictures that are in that little tarpon Boca Grand brochure, you'll see there's a fighting chair mounted on the bow of my boat. And as you hook a fish into there, you walk yourself up front, get seated in the chair, and we commence to continue and fight the fish. Skyway fishing and all that, I don't use that chair. There's really just no need for it. And all of the other rods that we have don't have those. If you try to use this thing with that gimbal in it on a rod that doesn't have a gimbal, it doesn't work well. So take that gimbal off and throw it away, because pretty much if you're using this, you're going to be using a rod that you don't need it anyways. But as you're fighting fish, it allows you to to hold on to it. I usually slide my hand a little farther up forward and manipulate the reel that way, and it just takes some of the pressure off your belly and all that stuff. There's a bunch of different devices on the market, but for the money, when these are on sale, you can't beat them. They're pretty much the best way to go. UPro, what is that? Like I said, I'm kind of bouncing all over the place. UPro makes a really, really, really good fluorocarbon. It's one of the best fluorocarbons I've actually come across, and I used Seaguar for years. Their cost on it is actually really cheap. I think these retail for their 25-yard spools. I think they retail for like $15 kind of deal for 100% fluorocarbon. This a 25-yard spool of Seaguar 60-pound test is like $35. I mean, so it's a pretty big difference when you use as much of it as I do. 60-pound, 80-pound, and on my juvenile fish, downtown fish, those little guys, snook tackle, 30-pound gear. You're really not going to break them off on 30-pound gear. They won't chafe through it. They're not. Most of those fish aren't going to break the line strength, but you need something just abrasion resistance. The way their mouth's structured, they're going to chafe up line. I get leaders back sometimes that it's chafed 4 foot up the leader kind of thing, and you got to remember as he ate it and swallowed that crab with a circle hook kind of deal, as that crab and the circle hook came back out of his mouth, but it was all the way at some point all the way down into his lower jaw and sometimes even into his belly. The way a circle hook works is you come tight on it, it pulls itself out and grabs the corner of his mouth. Gloves. The gloves that are out there on the market are the only way to go. I've done so much damage to my hands and everything else over the years trying to leader tarpon and handle tarpon without gloves. Even the little guys now, I still wear gloves. I mean, a lot of people look at me and they're like, dude, why you're wearing a glove for a 10-pound fish? But everybody knows, Rick will tell you all that. A tarpon might be laid over on his side and looking up at you and all that. As soon as you physically touch him, all of a sudden something happens in his head and in him to where he's going to take off. And they're notorious for having their mouth closed, and they're just really hard fish to kind of get a hold of. It's not like a snook. You can't kind of grab them up underneath the side of them and lift them up that way. The only way to do it's the gloves. Bunch of different gloves on the market, but just make sure basically the top of your hands, if you look at my hands, I've got permanent scars in my hands to where I've had fish latch down on me and shake their head, and I've lost every bit of skin on my hand at times where it looks like I fell off a motorcycle at 80 miles an hour kind of thing. But wear gloves, because the other thing, a lot of guys will tell you that fish a lot. If you haven't got staph infection at some point in your life as a fishing guide, you will get it. Pinfish pricks, all that little stuff. You gotta remember all the stuff swimming around the grass flats and everything else. It's got a lot of bacteria on them. One of the biggest things that I tell people when I have it on my boat, for one, it's kind of nasty. If you look at what we do all day long and then we go grab a public sub when it comes to lunchtime, we're like, this is delicious kind of deal. Wash your hands, kind of deal. Those little pump bottles of Perel, or I always say, I call it Propel sometimes. My wife likes to know, that's the bottled water. It's the Perels or whatever, the hand sanitizer one, whatever. The hand sanitizer, little pump spray, it's 100% like alcohol kind of thing. Keep one of those on your boat. I keep one on my console. It's in like a little dispenser. I've got like actually the one that they have at the hospital where it mounts to my console, and I tell my guys, if you get pricked, especially like pinfish, how it is, you're putting a bait on, even white bait have that little razor thing underneath their pectoral fin, and when I squeeze them all the time to put them in my chum bat, the chum stuck, I'm like, God damn it, and I'll look down, and I've always got a Band-Aid on my hand somewhere from getting cut by fish. So clean your hands. I've got some really good friends of mine that have gotten staph infection from fishing. Dave Marquette almost died from it last year, kind of thing. Same thing. We're out there every day. We're pricking our hands. A lot of bad things in the water. Just make sure you clean your hands. Like I said, especially with tarpon fishing, they'll grab a hold of you. When I typically grab a tarpon, I reach in and I grab them just like that. When they lock down on you and they do that head shake like deal, pretty much this part of your hand, and you kind of see the scars that I've got on mine, he's going to rub all that skin off. So wear gloves, makes life a lot easier on you. Beach fishing. We're going to kind of get into the beach fishing stuff. One of the biggest things that I don't do a lot of anymore, just because we've got too many people out there that don't know how to do it and end up ruining it for me, kind of thing. We've got probably in Tampa Bay, in St. Pete, to Bradenton, to Clearwater, Three Rookers, Honeymoon, all that stuff. We've got some of the best beach fishing that there is. Lots of different ways you can catch them. Live bait, plugs. Plugs are one of my favorite. This is one of my plug outfits. Pretty much one of the most, there isn't a mirror lure on the market that's caught more tarpon than a purple demon. Why, I don't know. It just is. This is a brand new one. I actually threw this one on just for demonstration purposes for the seminar tonight. I usually take out this middle hook when I'm actually fishing them. You don't need that middle hook on there, and it just makes it harder, not only on the fish, but to get them out after you hook them and you're trying to release them. I usually leave the lead hook on and that back hook, and a lot of times, depending on the fish and all that, a lot of times I will upgrade the size of the hook on them, kind of deal, and I'll go up one more size hook, and I'll go to a 2X or a 4X hook, because sometimes they will straighten them out. The little fish won't, but you stick that bait in a 150-pound fish, and you put a lot of heat on him, and he's going to straighten out one of those hooks. Calcutta 400 or 700 reel. This is a 400. A lot of times, and one of my really good friends, C.A. Richardson's actually the one that started teaching me that, is actually putting monofilament on it. As guides, we pretty much always throw braid. Everything we do, we throw braid. When you're throwing plugs, mirror lure-wise, topwater-wise, anything like that, monofilament's actually better than braid because it has stretch. One of the reasons we went to braid is we wanted to eliminate stretch. But then when we actually got into it, and you realize when you're fishing plugs, you kind of want that stretch. You get a big snook that hits a top dog or a top pup or some of these topwater baits, and there's no stretch there. When he wants to turn around and go, a lot of times you'll pop the fish off just by his initial shock of the line when he decided he wanted to change directions. So this one's, I've actually been doing a lot of king fishing with this reel, so that's why it has braid on it. But most of the time in tarpon season, it's got 20 or 25-pound monofilament on it. It's just a way to go. The biggest thing with tarpon on the beach, and this is the biggest peeve that we've got, is you can't chase the fish. Everybody wants to try to chase the fish, and they want to run to the fish and everything else. You see the fish, you get up ahead of them, and you let the fish come to you, kind of deal. Sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes your boat positioning is wrong, and you should have been 30 yards farther forward, because now when he did come in front of where you are, he's just outside of your cast, but that's just part of it. It's part of tarpon fishing. I tell people, it's like, you want to come out and you want to catch 20, 30 snook with me? This is the time of year. Let's go do it. Tarpon fishing is kind of the deer hunting of fishing. We're not going to go out and we're not going to stick 5 to 10 fish on a regular basis. It is a hunt. I've had days to where, especially with some of the fly guys, that I'll pull, somebody around for 5 hours to get one presentation on a fish, and that's just part of tarpon fishing. It's just the way it is. Most people have seen me around this area. Obviously, I have a 24-foot Schaefer tower boat. That is my main guide charter boat kind of deal. And I have an 18-foot Maverick Master Angler that I use for some sight casting stuff and fly fishing. I don't do as much fly fishing as these guys do, but I have a couple of customers of mine that do like to chase the tarpon key, redfish, and all that kind of stuff on fly. And then if I'm fishing on the beach, sometimes with one guy, I'll fish my smaller boat, mainly just because it does. I don't have to deal with my shadow of my tower and the bigger boat and all that, and I can pull my Maverick versus you're not pulling a Schaefer no matter how big you are. But that's pretty much the gist of it. When you're tarpon fishing the beaches, you're watching, and these are pods of fish. We're talking 30, 40, tarpon. They do a lot of times what we call daisy chaining. kind of deal. They'll come up, they'll roll, they're all in a big circle, and they're kind of like a little merry-go-round. They're all kind of swimming together in a circle. Those are happy fish. Those fish will eat. If you can get a bait into the middle of that circle or on the outside edges of it, you're going to get bit. You see fish, and when they're rolling up and down the beach, and they look like a porpoise when they're rolling, those fish are moving. They will eat. There is some ways you can make them eat, but those fish are much harder to eat. You see fish out there rolling around, come in pretty much, and I do this snook fishing. A lot of people are like, why do you come in the way you do? I come in at a 90-degree angle to every spot that I want. I watch more guys, especially in Bishop's Harbor, run over the top of where the snook are every single day. And you're like, you guys, when you come into a spot, if you're not going to fish that point, don't drive up the shoreline 15 feet off the mangroves to get to that point. Come in at it at a 90-degree angle, power pull down, chum it, and let's, whack them, and when that bite shuts off, we'll back out of it so we don't mess up the whole rest of that wall, because I might want to come back and fish another part of that wall or that spot in an hour or so. Same thing with tarpon. You're cruising out the beach, and I usually try to stay about 100 yards, 150 yards off of where I know the line of where the fish are running. And when I see a pod coming in, I'm watching them way ahead. They show. It's kind of hard to hide a 150-pound fish when he comes up and rolls and he's glimmering in the sunlight because he's all silver kind of thing. When you see that, basically you're just trying to find an intercept course. He's coming down this way, you're idling this way, 90-degree angle to where you think he's going to be. And if you do it right, he's going to end up being 5 feet from the boat. I've hooked more tarpon on the beach, literally 5 feet from the boat, because they're coming right at me. I throw a crab into him, he swims into the crab, and it's pretty cool when you see him come up and open his mouth and gulp down on it and turn around and go the other way. That's really the biggest thing. A lot of guys, as soon as the fish pass them and they're outside their casting range, they're firing up their engine, and they're going to try to let them go. Let them get another 200 yards from you and do it all over again. If you sit there and try to keep pushing the fish, they're just going to start moving. They're never going to daisy chain. They're never going to stop and get what we call happy kind of deal. You'll see them come up and tail slap the water, and they're just playing. When they're doing that, it don't matter if you throw a threadfin, a pinfish, a crab, a plug, anything into them, they're going to eat most of the time. Back to the skyway, way of fishing. A lot of people don't know how we fish the skyway. I have two different sets of anchor line of my main anchor in my boat. Obviously, most all of us, everybody has a power. A lot of us guides have power poles. That's what I use 90% of the time. I have a smaller C-claw anchor on 3/8 inch rope that is wrapped around. If you go to Home Depot, they basically the electrical cord coils that they're little round little circle things. You wrap electrical cord around them. They're the best thing in the world for storing anchor line. I watch more guys, and especially when I do take my family out and we go out to the beer can, and you're watching people anchor, and knots are all coming out, ropes like this, and they can't figure out how to put their anchor on it. Unless you're throwing 1/2 inch rope or bigger anchor line, most all anchor lines, 100-foot anchor line, which is pretty much all you need for fishing inside Tampa Bay, will fit on one of those coils. So you got the whole coil, and you got your anchor, and now you can stick that in any hatch you want. It doesn't have to be an anchor locker. It'll just store easier. You're not tangling all your rope up. It's one of the tricks that some of the guides, I know some of the other guys, I see them do it. I've been doing it for 15 years kind of thing. That's how I keep my aft anchor. If I am going to go to beer can, I have my bow anchor, and then I have my aft anchor. My aft anchor is going to, obviously, the aft, that's what's keeping me from spinning around. If I'm inshore fishing the Little Manatee River, there's a lot of spots in the river that are phenomenal snook spots and red spots and everything else that my power pole won't stick in. It's 9 foot of water, it's 8 foot, it's right on that verge of my power pole. I can kind of hear it scraping along, but there's just not enough, there's just not enough pole there left to make it stick. So I pull out my little aft anchor, which has no chain on it, no nothing. It's a 12-pound C-claw with rope on it. That's it. My bow anchor, or my bigger anchor, is an 18-pound C-claw with 8 foot of chain on it and 300 feet of 1/2 inch rope, primarily. This time of year, I just changed it out 3 weeks ago. I take that 300 feet of rope off and I throw that in the storage kind of thing because I'm not going to need that for the next couple months, and I put 100 foot of 1/2 inch rope. Reason why is when you're tarpon fishing the bridge. If you got 300 feet of rope or just excessive amounts of rope, you got to remember when that fish eats and we got to get off that anchor, that's all that anchor line that's laying out there and all that. And I've tried in years past getting some of those Velcro wraps and kind of wrapping the unused portion of it and Velcroing it and keeping it. It's just a pain in the butt. Keep 2 different anchor ropes kind of thing. I can do it if a lot of you guys, I fish out of Simmons Park, or I pick up out of Simmons Park, or I pick up out of here pretty much every day. If you see me and you need me to do it, I can braid 3-strand. I do all my own 3-strand stuff. Basically, the end of your 100-foot anchor line, braid 3-strand into a little loop, just like that. And that's literally all you need. The end of my anchor line, this is what it looks like. So the very end of it, it has this in it. I have one of these clips inside of my boat that anchor line actually gets attached to. So when I'm grouper fishing and stuff like that, and I let out my anchor, and I'm like, oh shit, I let out a little too much scope kind of deal. Now my anchor line with a $200 something sea claw and everything else just exited the boat kind of deal. It's a little harder. So that's clipped to my boat. When I'm tarpon fishing, I unclip it from my boat, from actually inside my anchor, my anchor locker, and I clip it to this. That's my throw buoy. When I sit at the bridge and I sit at the skyway and I'm positioned up to where I'm going to tarpon fish, the good thing about a 100-foot anchor line, most spots you're tarpon fishing the bridge, you're 20, 26 feet of water, you're fishing that edge. Time you add a little scope to it, you don't have to do the whole, what you learn in sea school and all that stuff, 7 to 1 and all that. It's like, buddy, if I did that, I'd have to carry around 500 feet of anchor line with most of the scope ratios they tell you to do. If I'm in 25 feet of water, I've got usually about 60 feet of anchor line between me and my anchor kind of thing. So that leaves me 40, 30, 40 yards on top of the deck kind of deal. I take it all out of my anchor locker because last thing you want to do is be trying to feed crap out of your anchor line when you got a 120-pound tarpon tail dancing behind the boat kind of thing. Take it all out, lay it on top, basically right next to your cleat, clip that to what you've braided into the end of your line kind of thing. So you're just clipping that to the back side of your anchor line. And all of this just sits right on top of my deck. When I cleat it, I don't even cleat it the way most people, you're wrapping around the cleat and then you're locking it and all that. I usually wrap it around and I just lock it one time. And it's usually going away from, so basically, obviously it's coming in that way. It's on that front side of the cleat kind of deal. So the way my anchor line is attached to my cleat. Basically what I can do is in a hurry, because usually my customers are like, oh my God, what do I do? I walk back there, I can grab my anchor line, lift it up, and I just throw it. And I don't even try to throw any of this. The point of leaving it on top of your bow like that is I drive off of it, all of it's coming off anyways. And I don't care where it lands or where it goes or anything like that, as long as it doesn't get caught on anything in the boat as I'm coming off of there. I'm going to drift aft of the bridge, we're going to go catch the fish. When we're done catching the fish, I'm going to pull right back into my spot. This is holding my spot for me, so now anybody that does try to pull into my spot, we're going to have words. But that's basically now marking my anchor. It's marking my spot. I pull back up, I wrap onto it, we grab another bait, we keep fishing, unless I decide I'm going to move or something like that. This is a pretty big one. It doesn't take this much to float anchor line. A little tiny fender is all you need. I think they call them like P4s or P2s or whatever. I mean, literally, it's a fender that's like that big. I don't know what size boat you'd use that for because it's literally like that big around and it's about that long. That's all you need to really technically float an anchor line. But if you're trying to fish the bridge and the wind picks up and now you're trying to find your anchor line and you've got 3-foot swells kind of deal, it makes it nice to have this. I watch people all the time, try to tie life jackets onto anchor lines and all that. And pretty much anybody who's fished under the skyway, current rips through there pretty hard. No matter how good of a knot you tied around a life jacket, more likely the current's going to find a way of getting that line off of there and all that. That's why I use stainless steel clips. I don't tie any knots kind of thing. For one, I don't want to deal with that. And for two, I don't want a knot to slip or come loose or anything like that. All my stuff's braided. I braid everything into my stuff. And then I clip everything to it. Come off the anchor, like I said, go fight the fish, come back, because you don't have time, trust me, you don't have time to be trying to pull an anchor up and digging an anchor out, especially if you get an anchor to hold right kind of deal, which sometimes that's an issue at the bridge. You got to be able to get off the anchor, go fight the fish. A lot of those bridge fish will take 100 yards of line without slowing down kind of thing. And if you're sitting there, if you don't have the right capacity, reels, everything else, which by the way, these 60 quantum Cabos hold right at 300 yards of line kind of deal. Behind my 300 yards of line, I've got 50 yards of green Berkeley solar monofilament. Most people know that you've got a back braid with monofilament on the back of a spool, or else sometimes it'll have a tendency of slipping and digging into itself and all that. Good things, contrasting colors. You'll notice every tarpon rod that I fish, or pretty much every rod I fish in general, has a yellow solar on it. When I'm driving, I need to see the angle of the line. I need to see where that fish is at. and I can tell a lot just by looking at this physical part of the line of what the fish is doing. I ever see green solar come out, really bad day. We need to get on the move now, kind of deal. It doesn't happen a lot tarpon fishing, but I will tell you, I've had kingfish take 300 yards of line on me, and right now we're catching some blackfin tuna. Same thing. You get two blackfin tuna that you hooked at the same time, and one goes one way and one goes the other, and the boat's got to pretty much sit still. You need the line capacity to be able to get the fish to the boat and do that. One of the biggest things that I've been a part of since the beginning of it is DNA tagging these fish. It's a really cool program that the state's doing. Basically, you call them, and they're at pretty much every tackle store this time of year. Southshore's got them, O'Neill's has got them, you name pretty much the tackle store, they've got these picked up. They look just like that. They come with a pencil. There's some pieces of paper that are inside of it that you write the detailed information on. They've got a vial inside of there that's got ethanol. The one good thing that ethanol is good for, because it's darn sure not good for gas. It's a vial. It's got ethanol in it that'll preserve it, and it's also got a number. Each one of those all have a different number on them. When you write them on the piece of paper, you need to know that number corresponds with the information that you're giving them, because when they get these, I send them to them in the gallon size Ziploc bag. Usually when I get 20 or 30 of them, I send them to the state that way. So they get, from me, they get in a gallon size Ziploc bag, 25 or 30 of these with a bunch of pieces of paper all stuffed in there. They end up basically finding the little piece of paper that corresponds with this one, tells them where it was caught, when it was caught, how big it was, fight duration time, if it was a live bait fish, an artificial fish, whatever. Basically what the state is trying to do from that is they're trying to see if the downtown fish that I catch as 40-inch, 10-pound, tarpon, I end up catching in Boca Grande as 200-pound fish X amount of years later. Like anything in research and data, it takes a long time to build a database. Right now we're at like 4,000 samples that we've collected for the state in the past like 3 or 4 years of the program. Of the 4,000, if you really think of percentages and all this kind of stuff, of the 4,000 samples that we've done, we've already got like 15 recaptures, which is kind of cool if you think about, like, of 4,000 fish, we've already recaught 15 of those fish, and most of them were caught in Boca Grande Pass or here in Tampa Bay. It's a really cool thing. It's really easy to do. These kits all come with a little Scotch-Brite scuffing pad on them. Basically, when you get the fish to the side of the boat, top part of his cheek kind of deal, you're just rubbing, and basically you're just going to scratch. A lot of people really don't understand how to do it, and they just scratch them, and all you're doing is removing the slime coat. They physically need the white scale DNA content of the fish. The slime coat doesn't contain the DNA that they need. They actually need it to where when you look at it, it won't be slimy and clear, it'll be white. You'll turn this pad into white and rub it until that happens. Basically when that does happen, you take it off, you mash it just because all of them are, it's some college kid that's an intern kind of deal. It's cutting these pads, sitting at St. Pete kind of deal, making these kits. So they're not the size that fit into here. You got to end up kind of just folding them and wedging them inside of there. Get the data turned in, and it's really cool. I mean, it's for one, I don't know if I've caught a lot of tagged snook and redfish and all that here in Tampa Bay. I actually caught 2 tagged snook yesterday in Bishop's Harbor. And it's neat, a couple weeks later, hearing the information of, that fish, we tagged it here, and this is how big it was, and you recaptured it, 2 months later or 6 months later or whatever. It's kind of cool getting that information back. But this is a program that the state's really trying to learn. Tarpon's one of those fish that we don't know. They'll flat out tell you. A lot of people, we don't understand their spawning habit. We know where snook spawn. We know when they happen. We know moon phases and everything else. Tarpon, we don't know if they're spawning 500 miles offshore or 40 miles offshore. I mean, it's something that we're still learning. They're still trying to figure that out. We really don't know if the fish that we catch in Boca Grande maybe winter here. We don't know. They're just trying to learn that different stuff, and this is some of the information that they get from that. But that's really about it. That's kind of just my rambling on. We'll kind of do some question and answer stuff, and then ask, whatever questions you guys feel have. I'm not one of those guys that I don't have secret spots kind of deal. There is no secret spots in Tampa Bay.